A woman simply used a sack of fine salt while cooking, and the emperor identified her as a time traveler. She was tossed into a water pit while still alive, and once she had no life left in her, the emperor ordered me, a servant in the cold palace, to bury her. I wasn't the least bit afraid. I picked up a shovel and began to dig. It was because in 3 years I had buried 99 time travelers. They were just like me, all hoping to obtain the phoenix seal to extend their lives. The eunuch working with me wiped his sweat, looked at me with a smile and said, "Sister Siqin, do you think there are more time travelers in the palace?" His words sounded like bait, and I dared not respond. After all, in the 3 years I've been here, 99 time travelers have already died in the palace. I kept a straight face, patted down the final layer of dirt, and frowned at him. "Get back to work. Don't ask things you shouldn't. Watch your head." From the very beginning, I have tried hard to pass myself off as one of them. I observe everything I don't understand quietly, and I never show off behavior or intelligence unbecoming of a palace maid. You are right, sister. I was just a bit curious. A few days ago, the head eunuch was searching for time travelers everywhere again. I wonder who the next one to die will be. I didn't answer, but my footsteps quickened to catch time travelers in the palace. They have actually tried every possible method. At first, they all thought they were the chosen ones, thinking that coming here meant they would be the emperor's one and only love. But whether it was quoting poems about the Yellow River or reciting mathematical formulas, some even went further, successfully creating high-performance explosives. They made the emperor delighted, immediately offering thousands in gold. But these fellow travelers revealed their ambition too quickly. They demanded the phoenix seal right away. The emperor is suspicious by nature, even if he feigns affection on the surface. But in my eyes, it is nothing more than being trapped in a golden cage, drained of all value. I once thought about escaping too, but the 49th traveler already tried it for me after being caught because her abilities were mediocre, contributing only what previous travelers had already offered. She was sentenced to death by caning. That day, every palace maid and eunuch off-duty gathered in the courtyard to watch the execution with their own eyes. By the time the traveler took her last breath, she was nothing but a limp sack of flesh, blood, and shattered bone. It was then that I realized everyone in the palace monitors each other. There is a collective responsibility system. If one person acts suspiciously, anyone who knows and stays silent also faces death. Little Liu, who is beside me, is the person responsible for me, and I for him. I don't know if he was testing me or if he was truly curious. After returning, I continued serving meals to the consorts in the cold palace because of the knowledge brought by travelers. Over the past 3 years, the cookware in the palace has changed significantly. However, I don't reveal my stir-frying or deep-frying skills. Every time, I just chop up the allocated ingredients, toss them into a pot to boil until cooked, and then serve them in a bowl. Little Liu always says that what I make is no different from pig swill back home. Yet, I continue to follow the palace rules, living the same monotonous life for 3 years. Just as I finished delivering food today, an officer under the head eunuch arrived. I hurried to put on a flattering smile, bowing my head so low it nearly reached my knees. "You've worked hard, Eunuch Zhang. What brings you all the way to the cold palace? It has been too quiet in the palace lately. The head eunuch wants us to look around and see if there is any new news." What kind of news could there be in the cold palace? It is nothing but eating, sleeping, and waking up to eat, and listening to the madwoman inside singing their songs. Eunuch Zhang's hem brushed past me, and the direction he was heading was clearly towards my room. As I watched him push the door open and go in, my palms were drenched in cold sweat. Just because, to remain unremarkable and unnoticed, I had designed a feng shui formation in my room beforehand. Aunt Siqin, this room is quite interesting. It is laid out differently from the other servants. Outside in this winter, all the plants have withered, yet this orchid of yours is still blooming. Truly impressive. Hearing this, my heart skipped a beat. Before this, another transmigrator had already suggested greenhouse vegetables to the emperor. Could he have misunderstood this orchid of mine, which I raised using feng shui? It is nothing, just burning coal at night. The environment in the room is warm, and since the window faces east, this flower happens to get plenty of sunlight. Eunuch Zhang stared at me, but said nothing. In the end, he went to all the other rooms in the cold palace and took a look around. Once Eunuch Zhang and the 2 young eunuchs had left quite naturally, my heart was still hanging in my chest, ready to jump out. But just as I stood up straight, the errand boy for Eunuch Zhang returned. He demanded the orchid from my room earlier. Before I could even nod, it had already been carried away. Damn it, my birth date and time were buried in there. I didn't dare to chase after them at all. My throat was dry and itchily irritated. I coughed continuously several times. Aunt Siqin, you're shivering. Could it be that you caught a chill digging graves yesterday? Xiao Luzi helped me lie down, but I started shaking uncontrollably. I couldn't tell if it was from fear or a genuine cold. That night, I had a nightmare, dreaming that the maid who was beaten to death became me, with every bone in my body aching unbearably. When I woke up, the room was deathly quiet. The spot where I kept the orchid remained empty. At this hour, Xiao Luzi wasn't there either. I didn't know where he had gone. I draped a coat over myself and opened the door. I found the cold palace unusually quiet. Little Liu hurriedly rushed back at that moment. "Auntie, why are you standing outside? Be careful or the wind will worsen your condition." He came over to support me, but I caught a faint, strange odor on him. It smelled like vomit, and yet, it also smelled like blood. "Where did you go? Why is there such a strange smell on you?" Little Liu helped me sit down. His forced composure turned instantly rigid. His hands just hung in the air, not knowing what to do. He is 5 or 6 years younger than me. The last time he was this frightened was when we were burying the bodies together. The concubines in the cold palace are all gone. Everything is gone. A sense of dread welled up in my heart. In this palace, a woman can never leave in her entire life, unless she dies. I asked him what the reason was. Little Liu said it was the emperor's decree. So the smell on Little Liu was the stench of the blood and vomit left behind after the concubines drank the poisoned wine. No wonder it was so quiet in the cold palace tonight. Not even a single cricket was chirping. "Go wash up. Wash away this bad omen." I handed him a cloth to let Little Liu wipe away his tears. Those concubines were once our companions here. We had grown somewhat attached to them. Now that there is no one left to serve in the cold palace, we will both be reassigned. Who knows where we'll end up? I didn't speak, just urged him to wash up quickly. And by the way, rearrange the furniture, shifting the feng shui in the room. It seems they have already become suspicious of me. At the first light of dawn the next day, 4 or 5 eunuchs arrived at the cold palace. They said head eunuch Zhang was concerned for Little Liu and me, and had sent them to help with burying so many people. The disgraced concubines were wrapped in straw mats, stacked layer upon layer on the cart. I used to retch at the sight of this, but now I just keep a piece of ginger in my mouth to hold it back in my mouth. Once we arrived at the mass grave, Xiao Luzi asked me how we should dig the plot, because he knows I like to use a compass for feng shui. He stood nearby and waited. I scanned the few eunuchs who had followed us and said with a cold tone, "Just dig a big hole and bury them. They weren't favored in life. Do you really think they deserve a better final resting place?" Xiao Luzi was stunned for a moment, but he quickly nodded and signaled them to dig. In the past, I would always prepare the bodies and determine the proper orientation. But today, these people wouldn't allow me the luxury of kindness. Only a sharp and bitter demeanor is fitting for the nature of people in the inner palace. The transmigrated girls are all lively and kind-hearted, coming from the best of eras. Some haven't even killed a chicken before. Their naive innocence is clear for all to see. The cart was tilted, and the bodies lay in the pit, twisted and tangled, because rigor mortis had already set in. Some of the bodies had their arms raised high, as if trying to grab onto something. I swung my shovel, and shoveled dirt along with the other eunuchs. Soon, my aching body was drenched in sweat. As I turned to leave, everything went black before my eyes. Losing my balance, I collapsed onto the grass. After being lifted onto the cart by the eunuchs, I was already drifting in and out of consciousness. When I finally came to again, I found myself in a new room. The bedding was still my own, but the furnishings in the room were clearly better than before, and the small feng shui trinkets I had kept in the room had all been piled in a corner. The feng shui array meant to avoid the emperor had been broken. The answer was obvious. "You're finally awake, auntie. You were burning up and babbling about." 3 times 6 18 9 9s 81. The person who entered was a young palace maid. I didn't recognize her, even though she wore a gentle smile and looked quite innocent. I kept my guard up entirely. When people are sick and feverish, I probably didn't even know what I was saying. "I know you were reciting the multiplication table. I heard the noble ladies mention it before. Are you trying to say I'm a transmigrator?" "Are you, though? Transmigrators are born to be royalty. If I had that kind of status, would I still be stuck in this cold palace for so many years?" "Please don't be angry, mistress. I was just guessing. And I haven't gone around gossiping about it." I let out a long sigh of relief. Thank goodness, it was just the multiplication table. That thing has existed for thousands of years. A few words should be enough to brush it off. I told her, "Don't spout nonsense anymore. We servants don't have the destiny of masters." No sooner had I finished speaking than eunuch Jiang started laughing outside. He appeared in the room in an instant. "You are blessed, mistress. The emperor has taken a liking to your orchids and wants you to come and receive your reward." Without waiting for me to acknowledge the reward. The maid next to me began dressing me immediately. It seemed there was no avoiding it today. The path to Yuqing Palace felt like I was shackled in iron. As I walked up the stairs with my head held high, it was as if I could already see the countdown to my death. As I stepped into the grand hall, my heart started pounding wildly. Your servant, Siqin, pays her respects to His Majesty. May you live 10,000 years. Look up and let me see you. The Emperor's voice sounded like a curse. I clearly saw the death countdown popping up before my eyes. Although I really wanted to curse, I kept my eyes lowered, not daring to look at the Imperial face. I hear you know how to recite the multiplication table. The Emperor's tone was certain. It seems someone had already reported it. I didn't plan on hiding it, so I told the Emperor that my father was a geomancer and taught me the basics before I entered the palace. Then, my chin was lifted up, forcing me to look the Emperor in the eye. No wonder other transmigrators would kill to be here. Who knew this emperor would be so handsome? Then do you know what an airplane is? Is it a pheasant that can fly? The emperor sneered. Terrified, I immediately bowed low and prostrated myself. My posture was no different from any other palace maid. The emperor let out a loud laugh at the sight and said to me, a few days ago, I obtained something called a system. It told me that if I kill all the transmigrators, my empire shall endure for 10,000 generations. What do you think of this? I never expected the emperor to have a system too. I suppressed the shock in my heart and forced myself to remain calm. As I began to pledge my loyalty to the emperor, I said, Your Majesty, the fortunate are blessed by heaven. This servant will certainly eliminate the transmigrators for you, so that the great Yang Empire may be peaceful and prosperous for 10,000 generations. The emperor laughed out loud. It seems my flattery was to his liking, but in the next moment, he suddenly paced behind me and slammed his hand heavily onto my shoulder. Well said, however. Why do I see the words Simon Transmigrator above your head? Well said, however. Why do I see the words Thin Transmigrator above your head? With a boom, every nerve in my brain snapped. He knows. How could he know? My disguise was flawless. Every word and every action of mine strictly adhered to the rules of this era. In 3 years, I never once showed a flaw. Was it the orchid or the multiplication table the little maid overheard? No. The multiplication table has been around for thousands of years. It isn't enough to be ironclad proof. Then was it the birth date buried in that flower pot? Did they use that to verify my background? No, that is not it either. If he truly had solid proof, I would already be in the Bureau of Corrections. Instead of standing here in the Yuqing Palace, I can feel it. The Emperor's gaze is dissecting every tiny expression on my face. This is a trap testing the machinations of an emperor. He has no evidence. He is just bluffing, perhaps from some minor clues. He has begun to suspect me, but he is far from being certain. This statement of his is like a vast net cast by a fisherman, waiting for me, a fish full of doubts, to swim right in. If I were to admit it, or try to defend myself too much, I would immediately confirm his suspicions. The outcome would only be more miserable than that of the 99th compatriot, and if I were to act completely ignorant, I might arouse his suspicion by seeming insufficiently respectful. In a flash of lightning, I manifested the reaction of a truly local maid terrified by the very term transmigrator. This was the appropriate response. I bowed my head once more, my forehead hitting the carpet with a dull thud. Mercy, Your Majesty. This servant is slow-witted and does not know what Your Majesty means by those words. A transmigrator is a taboo in the palace. I have only heard whispers of it while burying the noble ones. I wouldn't even dare to think of such things in daily life. How could it possibly be on my head? This servant has only hairpins and sweat on her head. I would never dare let anything else defile the imperial countenance. I beg Your Majesty to see the truth. I beg Your Majesty to spare this lowly life. I buried my head deep into the carpet, crawling with all my might, assuming the most humble and submissive posture. This is the first thing I learned in this man-eating imperial harem, and it is the most important survival rule. When you are unsure of the other party's cards, lower yourself as much as possible. Let them trample on you, and only then might you avoid being crushed. The grand hall was dead silent. I could feel the Emperor's gaze still burning into me. Time slipped away, second by second. Each second, like suffering in a boiling pot of oil. I don't know how long it lasted. Long enough for my knees to start going numb, and for my forehead to swell from the rush of blood. Before a cryptic chuckle sounded from above, she guessed that he believed her. Or perhaps my reaction has temporarily eased his suspicions. Look up at me. Do you not wish to be empress? I am forced to look at the emperor's handsome, striking features. His skin is fair. His lips are thin. When his face is expressionless, he appears cold and indifferent. A man like this is born to be a ruler, viewing human life as nothing more than blades of grass. The emperor suddenly steps forward, reaching out to pull me up from the floor, and forcefully draws me into his embrace. This sudden intimacy makes the hair on my arms stand up. It is not because of any emotional stirrings, but the instinctual tremor of prey caught in a predator's jaws. Almost simultaneously, the data on the transparent floating screen before my eyes has changed. Imperial heart interest value, 1%. I cannot help but sneer inwardly, even as my eyes glisten with tears of genuine tension and fear, making me look pitiable. This measly 1% of fleeting interest is probably not even as strong as his interest in a potted orchid. Did those who came from my world before me also see this data? Did they think that if this number kept rising, they could win an emperor's heart and exchange it for a lifetime of glory and that ill-fated phoenix seal? How naive. The emperor has no heart, or rather, his heart belongs only to the empire and to himself. What he needs is the novelty and knowledge within the minds of US transmigrators and our endless array of capabilities. Once that value is squeezed dry, he will discard us without a shred of mercy. In the eyes of a king, we souls from another world are merely useful tools. The phrase killing the donkey once it is finished the grinding was practically tailor-made for him. I will never let this small, illusory data box and reveal even the slightest hint of my true thoughts. I would not dare, your majesty. I was born as a servant to you. I would never overstep my bounds. I lowered my eyes, my voice trembling, every word seeped in bone-deep humility. In my own world, all were equal, but here it is a society of male dominance, a feudal dynasty where imperial power is supreme. So what if I am a transmigrator? Without the backing of a powerful family, without any foundation or background, how could I ever become an empress? With those poems and verses, or with those half-baked scientific notions? The 99 before me have already provided a bloody lesson, that it is a dead end. The emperor seemed satisfied with my answer. He loosened the fingers gripping my chin slightly, but the arm locked around my waist did not relax in the slightest. He looked at me as if admiring an interesting toy, his eyes hiding a deep, inscrutable glint. Simone, take her away and keep a close watch. Finally, the emperor let me go. I was escorted by 2 burly eunuchs, who ushered me into a quiet palace chamber. The furnishings here were luxurious. Gold, silver, jewelry, and jade ornaments abounded. The bed hangings were made of the finest cloud silk, and the quilts were stuffed with soft, warm down. Even the tea set on the table consisted of the latest exquisite pieces from the imperial kilns. This place, though 1,000 times better than my previous life in the cold palace, was nothing more than a gilded cage. The doors and windows were bolted shut, and apart from the maid delivering my meals, no one ever spoke a word to me. The maids would set down the food box and hurry away, never uttering a single extra word. Their eyes held only reverence and detachment. On the table, someone had deliberately left paper and a pen. The pen was a fountain pen, an object from the modern world. The barrel was smooth, the nib gleaming with a cold metallic light. I wondered which fellow transmigrator had left this relic behind. Now it has become the bait used to hook me. I dare not touch it. I don't even dare to let my gaze linger on it for more than a second. I am certain that in every corner of this room, there is an eye watching me from the shadows. Everything here is a trap. Every day I just quietly eat and sleep, or sit by the window, peering through the gaps in the latticework, staring blankly at the unchanging sky outside. Days turned into weeks. On the transparent panel before my eyes, the countdown numbers ticked away mercilessly. I could clearly feel the effects of that strange radiation within my body, growing more severe. At first, it was just an occasional numbness and tingling in my fingertips, but now it has spread to my entire palm. I know that if this continues, I will end up like the others before me, dying in agony as my blood clots. Perhaps these people know this too. The 99-day countdown. They intend to use this method of wearing me down, to erode my will, little by little, forcing me to speak. On the 10th day of my imprisonment, the head eunuch came in person. He was slightly stout, clean-shaven, and always wore a smiling expression on his face. But his eyes were sharp and piercing, as if he could see right through a person's soul. Even the arrogant eunuch Zhang could only follow behind him respectfully, bowing and scraping. As soon as I saw him, I immediately knelt on the ground, my eyes filled with servile panic, knocking my head against the floor repeatedly. Lord Head Eunuch, this servant is truly not any divine maiden. Please, have mercy. Spare me, I beg of you. The head eunuch watched me, bowing again and again against the cold floor, until my forehead began to swell and bruise. Before he spoke in a leisurely tone, Lady Siqin, Why must you put yourself through this? As long as you admit your identity, you shall have phoenix crowns and robes in the future, and enjoy endless glory and riches. Here are paper and brush. Whenever you have made up your mind, and written down those strange tales and ingenious techniques you know, that is when you may leave. He left without even looking back. I clearly heard the heavy sound of the palace door being locked. 5 more days passed. My patience and my body were reaching their breaking point. Late that night, as I was tossing and turning, unable to sleep due to the stabbing pains in my hands and feet, the palace door was opened without a sound. A woman wearing a modern form-fitting dress walked in. Her makeup was exquisite, her long hair slightly curled. Seeing me, her face immediately lit up with surprise. "Sister, you're a transmigrator too, right?" I was so shocked by this sudden turn of events that I bolted upright from the bed and shrank back in confusion. She took a few steps forward and grabbed me in a tight embrace with strength that was truly startling. "Great, I've finally found my people. I transmigrated here too. My system told me to conquer the Emperor. What is your heartthrob value at? Let's brainstorm together. We can definitely complete the mission." I remained stiff as she held me, my brain working at high speed. Who is she? Is she truly a countrywoman of mine, or another more elaborate test sent by the Emperor? I didn't dare to gamble. I pushed her away forcefully and scrambled back into the corner of the bed, wrapping myself tightly in the quilt. My eyes were filled with fear and rejection of a stranger. I shook my head, pretending to have no idea what she was talking about. The woman went from initial excitement to constant chatter, attempting to use all kinds of modern jargon to signal me, from yeeds to weijuezi. From celebrity gossip to viral internet memes. I simply bowed my head in humility. I even poured her a cup of tea, trembling with fear. I served her obediently. "Do you have any concept of human equality at all? We women are not slaves." She seemed completely incensed by my subservience. I kept my head low and said, "You are a divine maiden. Humble servants like us cannot fathom your meaning. I dare not echo what you dare to say. In a place where imperial power is everything, preaching equality is a good way to get yourself killed." This girl, who goes by Consort Zhao, is a rare civil engineering major. At this very moment she is inside the imperial study, pointing at a massive blueprint, explaining to the Emperor the methods for constructing and improving dam irrigation. In her speech, she is full of the confidence and expertise of a modern intellectual. She says, "Your Majesty, please look. If we adopt a stable triangular structure here and combine it with the new cement formula, not only will the dam's flood resistance triple, but it will also save at least 40% in labor and time." The Emperor sits upon his throne, listening with keen interest, occasionally posing a question or two, a glimmer of admiration shining in his eyes. And I, like the other maids and eunuchs, stand with hands folded outside the door, like a statue without a soul. Consort Zhao's technical knowledge is extremely solid. However, due to the nature of her specialty, many projects require leaving the palaces for on-site inspections, and building a dam requires a great deal of time. The 99-day conquest period for him is a Damocles sword hanging over his head to extend his life, and also to make long-term use of his talents. Perhaps he goes daily to where the Qilin seal is kept, getting within 3 meters of the seal, staying for 1 hour. As long as he is within that specific magnetic field, for that specific amount of time, I am able to peer through the crack in the door and clearly see the countdown above his head, reset back to 99 days. She is a clever girl. She knows how to exploit the rules, and how to exploit the system. The Emperor, however, grew increasingly cunning. He provided her with convenience, yet kept a firm grip on the switch that extended her life. It became a tacit game of high-stakes strategy. I looked at the orchid pot in the corner of the Emperor's study. It had long since withered and died from neglect. Taking advantage of a moment when no one was watching, I carried it to a desolate, abandoned courtyard and dumped it. While pouring out the dirt, I reached inside and pulled out that note with my birth date and time. It was already blurred by the damp soil. Without hesitation, I tore it into tiny pieces, letting the fragments mix into the dust, leaving no trace behind. Once I had done this, a heavy weight seemed to lift from my heart. On my way back, I was inexplicably drawn to walk up to the highest watchtower nearby. The sunset's afterglow dyed the entire forbidden city a magnificent bloody crimson. I looked down at the endless palace walls. Inside these walls were endless schemes and struggles, and outside these walls was a freedom I could never return to. For some reason, I felt that the feng shui of the palace had recently turned quite ominous. The previously steady flow of energy seemed to have been stirred by some external force, exuding an indescribable sense of oppression and restlessness. The Emperor began to have nightmares. He would wake up in a start in the middle of the night, and then fly into a rage, having the staff dragged out and beaten. Naturally, I was not spared, because my hand trembled while serving tea, and a single drop spilled out. I was dragged out and given 12 strokes of the board. The heavy wooden board struck my hips and legs, hurting so much I nearly fainted. But I bit my lip hard, letting out not a single sound of pain. Even though I was in pain, I could not neglect my duties. The next day, I still had to drag my injured legs, limping around to serve before the emperor. The emperor, who was reviewing memorials, suddenly looked up and asked if I was in pain. I gave a sudden start, stifling the intense agony, and hurriedly knelt down. I pressed my forehead to the ground. Both your favor and your wrath are bestowed by the heavens. This lowly servant, thanks you for your grace, your majesty. I heard the emperor let out a low chuckle. There was not a trace of warmth in that laugh. It only chilled me to the bone. I dared not look up, only curled myself even tighter. The next second, I heard his icy voice ring out, "Get out." I dared not show a moment's hesitation, and actually rolled away, wretched and disheveled. As I scrambled over that sturdy, high threshold, as I struggled to push myself up from the floor, I saw a man wearing a modern white shirt and dress slacks, slowly walking toward the imperial study. He was wearing sunglasses, which he did not remove. Even under the dim light of the palace lanterns, the jarring contrast between the ancient palace eaves and the modern clothing he wore left me stunned for a moment. Although my heart was filled with curiosity, I dared not look any longer, nor did I dare to ask any questions. I could only bow my head as he passed. Once he went inside, all the servants attending the emperor were dismissed. Eunuch Zhang led his men to clear a 100-foot radius around the imperial study, forbidding anyone from coming near. But I knew of a place. I understand feng shui. Years of observation have given me a thorough understanding of the flow of energy. In every corner of this palace, behind the imperial study, is a rockery, and one inconspicuous crevice in the stone is positioned right against the study window. It is not only well hidden, but it also uses the principle of sound resonance to carry the conversation inside with clarity. I used a hollowed-out piece of bamboo hidden in my sleeve to fashion a makeshift listening device, and quietly crept toward it, without my permission. You've grown bold. Have you forgotten who the true master of this realm is? Do not defy my rules, or if the next transmigrator does not appear, I will have you killed. It was only later that I realized the man was the Grand Preceptor who held more power than the court, a figure even the Emperor dared not cross. It was he who opened the gateway between two worlds, and it was also he who sent these transmigrators to the Emperor's side one by one. This country's rapid growth over the past few years was all achieved only after the Grand Preceptor arrived. That night, Consort Zhao was serving the Emperor for the first time, and as the attendant on duty I had to wait outside the chamber. The spot where I had been beaten burned with such a fierce pain that I could not sit or stand in peace, forcing me to walk around to dull the agony. As I paced, I suddenly noticed that the layout of the inner chamber had subtly changed, drawing on my sensitivity to feng shui. I immediately sensed that behind the wall by the bed, there was a skillfully hidden compartment. The Emperor was currently with the Transmigrator, and stifled gasps drifted from inside the hall. Through the thin gauze and the dim candlelight, I witnessed a sight I would never forget for the rest of my life. The one on the bed, locked in intimacy with Consort Zhao, was not the Emperor at all, but the Grand Preceptor dressed in his modern attire. The Emperor sat on a chair nearby, clad only in a plain white robe, quietly watching this absurdity unfold, his expressionless face fixed on the scene before him, his eyes as hollow as those of a soulless puppet. I kept my frame hidden in the shadows where the light could not reach, moving to a more concealed spot to observe further. Indeed, Consort Zhao, appearing slightly dazed, was with the Grand Preceptor. She's good. Remember to reward her tomorrow. The Grand Preceptor, while putting on his clothes, issued orders to the Emperor. He threatened the Emperor, saying that if the Transmigrator didn't get pregnant soon, his reign would come to an end. I held my breath, and before they could discover me, I carefully made my way back to my station. I had barely stood still when I heard a call for water from inside the room. I carried a basin of water inside. The Emperor's hands were slender and cold. He took the towel from my hand and began to scrub every one of his fingers repeatedly and vigorously. In his eyes, the woman who had just served him on the bed held no shred of affection. Only endless disgust and coldness remained. I silently backed away. The next day, I observed the Emperor's words and actions closely. It seemed he was truly caught in the State Preceptor's grip, obeying his every command and showing unprecedented favor to Consort Zhao. Time flew by. The countdown on my objective panel had already passed the halfway mark. The Emperor's favor rating for me remained at a pathetic pathetic 1%. That night, I was jolted awake by a sharp, piercing pain in my lower body. That kind of pain felt like countless needles stabbing into my marrow all at once. It was no longer at a level that could be endured by sheer willpower. It was right at that moment that the Imperial Infirmary brought happy news. Consort Zhao was pregnant. It matched the Imperial Household Department's records perfectly. In the Imperial study, the Emperor's face looked terrible, yet Consort Zhao, ignorant of the truth, remained lost in fantasies of rising to power through her child. She began to drop hints to the Emperor even more frequently, wishing to touch the Empress's seal, and coveting the position of Empress. The Emperor smiled and agreed to all her requests, but turning away, I saw Eunuch Jiang personally retrieve a package of poison from the infirmary. The Emperor had no intention of letting the state preceptor's child inherit his great Yang dynasty. Staring at the bright red numbers on my panel, I carried a cup of freshly brewed ginseng tea into the study. I had already started coughing up blood and could only rely on hidden painkillers to maintain the appearance of functioning normally. My hands and feet were trembling uncontrollably, and my complexion was terrifyingly pale. At this point, the fact that I'm a transmigrator can't be hidden for much longer. Your Majesty, I know a way to ease your troubles. I placed the ginseng tea on the Imperial desk. My voice was soft, but enough to make the Emperor look up from his memorials. His gaze landed on me, filled with scrutiny and inquiry, right before the Emperor's eyes. I unfolded a diagram I had prepared from my sleeve. The next time the Grand Preceptor comes, please arrange the bedchamber like this. He will never be able to walk out again. It was a feng shui formation I had meticulously designed. A ghost wall. The Emperor's bedchamber was large enough. As long as a few key objects were shifted slightly, it could create an infinitely looping space, capable of trapping anyone forever. The Emperor's expression was calm, unreadable, but the favorability score on my panel was skyrocketing like a rocket. Finally, he spoke at last. Go and set it up, but don't think that I will pity you. You are just like that Grand Preceptor. I smiled and said nothing. Once his order was passed down, Eunuch Jiang immediately mobilized all his men to get the bedchamber prepared properly, and I waited, looking forward to the Grand Preceptor's appearance. The Grand Preceptor arrived again. This time he wore a long black windbreaker and was still wearing sunglasses. I personally guided him into the bedchamber. The Emperor sat in his chair, his expression as usual, but today, on the bed, there were no women prepared for the Grand Preceptor. The Grand Preceptor frowned and looked back at me, asking where the woman he was promised was. The moment he turned around, the Emperor and I silently retreated into the life gate of the formation, vanishing from his sight. The Grand Preceptor sensed something was wrong and tried to walk out, only to find that no matter which way he went, he would always end up right back where he started. The lamps of the ancient era were dim, and the Emperor and I were actually not far from him, but the spatial discrepancy made it impossible for him to see us. Do you think you can get rid of me, Your Majesty? Don't forget, it was I who helped you ascend to the throne, and helped you use the knowledge of the Transmigrators to stabilize the nation. If I hadn't opened the portal for you, this imperial throne would never have been yours. The Grand Preceptor tried to break the array by overturning the furniture in the room, but I had already anticipated this. All the critical points of the array were weighed down with the heaviest objects. With his strength alone, he could never shake them. He had become prey caught in a spider's web. In his desperation, the Grand Preceptor revealed many secrets, yet the Emperor remained silent throughout. Only the hatred in his eyes grew deeper. I respectfully invited the Emperor to leave, to be trapped in that place for 10 days without food or water, meet certain death. As I lay in the new sleeping quarters granted by the Emperor, the soft bedding could not soothe the bone-deep pain inside my body. I said to the Emperor, Your Majesty, your servant is dying. Could you grant me permission to find a final resting place myself? Do you not wish to be Empress? I weakly shook my head, forcing a bitter smile to my lips. I knew this was the final gamble. I told him that compared to being Empress, I longed for freedom more. He stared at me intently, as if trying to judge the truth in my words. After a long silence, he nodded slowly, allowing me to find my own burial site. I had Xiao Luzi take me to the mass grave, the spot I had carefully marked myself. Surrounding me were the remains of 99 fellow transmigrators. The Grand Preceptor's body was also buried in a position I had designated, 100 yin energy burial sites, plus the Grand Preceptor's powerful otherworldly soul as the focal point of the array. My star mapping life extension array was finally complete. As I lay in the coffin I had prepared long ago, I could feel a faint warmth surging from the depths of the earth into my entire body. I was betting that the magnetic field I created through feng shui and metaphysics could neutralize the radiation and extend my life. At the same time, I was also betting that the Emperor would have enough curiosity about an extraordinary woman like me who could kill the Grand Preceptor. On the transparent panel in front of me, the countdown had finally stopped at 1 day. The Emperor's men had come for me after all. They carried me, along with the coffin, back to the palace. They placed me directly in the Siqin pavilion where the seals were kept, less than 2 meters away from the seal itself. This provided me with significant relief from the pain. My quest countdown. The moment I made contact with the seal, reset itself to 99 days. The Emperor asked me what I wanted. He intended to reward me for my service. Looking at the numbers on the panel, I forcefully suppressed the powerful, almost irrepressible desire within me, just when the Emperor thought I would, like all the others, choose the position of Empress. I chose instead to leave the palace. The heart of a monarch. He can offer it, but he will not tolerate you asking for it. The 99 fellow travelers before me had all died because of their own impatience. They had not left the Emperor enough room to enjoy the thrill of the hunt. Like a cat playing with a mouse, my choice clearly surprised him and piqued a new interest. Siqin, do you know how many women in this palace would break their necks just to climb up here? And yet you want to leave. Your Majesty, this servant's life is as humble as a blade of grass, cursed with thin fortune and a shallow fate. I truly cannot bear such heaven-sent prosperity. The sky outside the palace may not be grand, and the land not vast, but it is the only place where I see a path to survival. I dare to be bold, and beg your Majesty to grant me this wish. I lowered my posture as much as I could. He fell silent again. This silence lasted even longer. What if I do not allow it? My affection score increased again. I replied with a choked voice. Whether it be thunder or dew, all is a blessing from heaven. If your Majesty does not allow it, then this servant shall continue to serve your Majesty until I grow old and pass away in the palace. I have no further words. He stared at me for a long time. Finally, he let go of my hand. He turned and walked toward the Empress's seal on the high pedestal. You want to leave? Fine. But before you go, do one more thing for me. I was then taken to the Imperial Observatory. This is the royal stronghold in charge of celestial phenomena, calendars, and geomancy. Under normal circumstances, aside from specific officials, even the chief eunuch cannot step foot here, and the task the Emperor gave me was to establish a bureau of anomalies here. Eunuch Jiang personally led me through layers of guarded courtyards, arriving in front of an independent small building in the deepest part of the observatory. Lady Siqin, from now on, you are the director of this Bureau of Anomalies. By the Emperor's decree, any anomalous person who appears in the palace hereafter is to be handled entirely by you. All archives and personnel of the Imperial Observatory are at your command. I understood clearly in my heart. He refused to let me go after all. He turned me, a suspected time traveler, overnight, into a manager of other time travelers. How ironic this was, and what a brilliant piece of imperial stratagem. He placed me in the position best suited to understand time travelers. He made me use my own expertise to deal with my own kind. This was both a way to use me, and a way to monitor me. As long as there is one more time traveler in the palace, I will never truly be able to leave. I said to Eunuch Zhang, this servant obeys the decree. Eunuch Jiang nodded in satisfaction, and from the hands of the young eunuch behind him took a sandalwood tray. On it rested a small dark iron token. The token was engraved with an archaic character for anomaly. He said this was my pass. With this token within the palace, other than the Emperor's sleeping quarters and the restricted Siqin pavilion, I have free passage everywhere. I reached out my hand and took the heavy token. I settled into the Anomalies Division of the Imperial Observatory. Xiao Luzi was also transferred here, becoming the only person under my command I could trust. He looked around at this quiet and unique courtyard, his face filled with unbelievable joy. Auntie, we have truly made it out of the misery. I didn't answer. I simply walked to the window, pushed open the carved wooden shutters, and beyond them stood the towering star observatory of the Imperial Observatory. The armillary sphere atop it glistened with a cold luster in the sunlight. Made it out, you say? This is merely another more opulent and more refined cage. I didn't rush to take action, but instead spent half the day. I read through every single ancient text on feng shui formations and astrology housed within the Imperial Observatory. This knowledge corroborated the metaphysical system in my mind, granting me a deeper understanding of how energy flows through this palace. At the same time, I was searching for a way to completely eradicate the radiation in my body, or a method that can permanently replace the containment field. I quietly rearranged the small building of the Supernatural Affairs Bureau, following the layout of the 9 stars of the Flying Palace. I moved the stone lion at the entrance by 3 inches. I replaced the potted plant by the window with an evergreen that gathers energy. The desk was moved to the scholarly star position, and the bed was placed at the gate of life. The aura of the entire building had been turned into a rock-solid defensive formation by me, not only to nourish my body, but also to imperceptibly ward off prying eyes and malice from the outside world. Next, I began to review the dossiers of those 99 transmigrated women. These files were kept sealed in the secret vault of the Astrological Bureau, recording the entire process from their arrival to their deaths, detailed down to every poem they contributed, every novel gadget they crafted, and the causes of their deaths. Looking at those rows of familiar modern knowledge, glass-making methods, gunpowder, distilled liquor, curved shaft plows, high-yield crops, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Each one of them had once been a brilliant woman. Each had once harbored dreams of changing the world and winning the Emperor's heart. Yet, in the end, they all became cold, lifeless files, tools discarded after being drained of their value. I categorized and analyzed them. Some died from being too brilliant and outspoken. Some died from sheer stupidity and naivety. But ultimately, they all died from a complete ignorance of the Emperor's dark arts of control. They are my cautionary tales, and they are the textbooks I will use moving forward. The next day, a new transmigrator arrived as expected. In the palace, a small flower viewing banquet was being held in the Imperial Garden. As the newly promoted chief of the Bureau of Occult Affairs, I was also summoned to attend. I simply stood far off in a corner, observing everyone present. The Emperor sat high atop the pavilion, watching with a lazy expression as the concubines vied for his attention. Suddenly, his gaze shifted slightly, casting a meaningful look in my direction. I understood his meaning perfectly, following his line of sight. Among the crowd, a young girl in a pale yellow palace dress stood out in a way that felt entirely different. She was not as reserved or shy as the other young ladies. Instead, her spirited eyes darted around everywhere. Her face was full of curiosity and excitement for this new world. When she saw the Emperor, a look of absolute determination flashed in her eyes. I could be almost certain that she was the 101st one. She possessed a certain lively, uninhibited aura that felt completely out of place in this era. It was a quality I had seen in countless fellow countrymen. Sure enough, during the talent showcase, she stunned everyone, clutching a modified pipa. Using a bizarre, yet highly rhythmic style of playing, she sang a modern pop song I was all too familiar with. The lyrics were bold and brazen, the melody was catchy and infectious, and the entire Imperial Garden fell into an eerie silence. The concubines were struck dumb. A faint, ambiguous smile played on the Emperor's lips, his fingers tapping lightly on the jade table, while his gaze never left the young woman. It was as if he were enjoying an interesting play. Expressionless, I took a small notebook and swiftly scribbled a few lines with a specialized charcoal pencil. Lu Qingqing, age 20, suspected 101st outsider. Personality lively and outgoing. Exhibitionist, lacks any sense of reverence. Skill type performing arts, preliminary risk assessment low. Disposition, observation. After the banquet ended, the Emperor's head steward came to convey an imperial decree. The newcomer was now my responsibility. Carrying a palace lantern, I arrived at the side hall of Zhaohui Palace, where Lu Qingqing had been granted residence. She had already been granted the rank of Karen. Though not a high position, it was still a leap into the upper echelons. When I arrived, she was ordering the palace maids and eunuchs about, making a complete mess of the hall's furnishings. Her bossy demeanor was exactly like those new interns, who think they are the center of the universe. Seeing me, she merely shot me a sidelong glance, then asked who I was. I said I was the manager of the Office of Anomalies, sent by His Majesty's order to instruct her in palace protocol. Lu Qingqing paused for a moment, as if realizing something. She dismissed her attendants, then leaned in toward me conspiratorially, lowering her voice to ask if I had also transmigrated here. While she spoke, she flashed me a peace sign. I lowered my eyes, pretending not to understand. She waved her hand impatiently, saying her system had already sent a notification, mentioning a predecessor in the palace, and claiming we were on the same side. Her mission was to win over the Emperor and become Empress. I sneered inwardly. Lady Karen, you can eat anything you like, but you cannot say just anything. In this palace, loose lips invite disaster. As you are a newcomer, you had best learn the proper rules first, before you can serve His Majesty well. Lu Qingqing curled her lip in utter disdain. What is the point of learning such feudal garbage? She scoffed. Modern women like me value independence, confidence, and personality. I intend to use my talents and my unique spirit to make the Emperor fall in love with me, not crawl around like a servant the way you do. She spoke with such fervent, dramatic flair, as if she were already looking forward to the day she would reign as empress over all. I did not argue with her. I simply reached into my sleeve and pulled out a manual of palace rules, placing it before her. "These are the rules of the palace. Please memorize them, my lady. I will check your progress tomorrow. Any mistakes or omissions will be punished according to palace protocol." Lu Qingqing widened her eyes and demanded, "Who would dare punish me?" "Naturally, His Majesty would. You are a consort personally appointed by him, my lady. I would never dare to be disrespectful to you. But I must offer you one piece of advice. In this palace there is no shortage of unique women. Beyond the burial grounds over there, I have buried 99 of them with my own hands. Each one thought she was the chosen, irreplaceable one." Upon hearing my words, a flicker of fear and confusion crossed Lu Qingqing's face. I said nothing more and offered a bow, then turned and left the side hall. I know that for flowers raised in a greenhouse like her, fear is far more effective than moralizing. I have given her the clearest possible warning. As for whether she chooses to heed it or not, that is no longer within my control. I compiled my meeting with Lu Qingqing into a written report, word for word, and submitted it to the emperor's desk. He read it with extreme care, even going over the bold modern remarks I recorded from Lu Qingqing twice over. He offered no comment after finishing, merely lifting his eyes to look at me. "How long do you think she will survive?" "Your Majesty, that depends on her own fortune, and even more so, on how much use she remains to you." This was both an assessment of Lu Qingqing and a reminder to the emperor of my own value. The corner of the emperor's mouth curled into a satisfied smirk. He enjoys this kind of clever, measured conversation. In the days that followed, Lu Qingqing was indeed much better behaved. She began to study palace protocols in earnest, though she remained clumsy and prone to errors. But at least her attitude had improved. The emperor would occasionally summon her to listen to her sing those strange new songs, or to tell some modern jokes, but the monarch's favor remained only at the level of light, superficial amusement. Meanwhile, using my position as manager of the Bureau of Strange Affairs, I began laying my plans in the shadows. Under the guise of surveying the palace's feng shui, I walked every corner of the palace and fixed the energy nodes of the entire Forbidden City firmly in my mind. I discovered that the heart of the palace's dragon vein lay in the Qilin Pavilion, which is also where the seal is kept. On the other side, Lu Qingqing's patience was clearly wearing thin. Her system seemed to be constantly urging her to complete her tasks, and her behavior became increasingly impatient. She began to drop hints, trying to pry the location of the seal from the emperor, and even attempted to use her pitiful knowledge of the modern world to improve the dishes in the imperial kitchen. She only ended up creating a mess of inedible concoctions, which displeased the emperor. I calmly documented all of her foolish actions and submitted them in regular reports. In my reports, Lu Qingqing was painted as someone with high ambitions but low ability and a desperate craving for quick results, someone unfit for any real responsibility. Finally, on a rainy night, she made a fatal mistake. That night, taking advantage of the guard shift change, Lu Qingqing snuck out to the Qilin Pavilion. She seemed unable to wait any longer, desperately trying to get close to the seal, but I had already learned of her plans through my informants. I didn't stop her, nor did I report her. I simply waited quietly behind a nearby rockery, watching her rush toward that hall, which would mean her destruction. The guards of the Qilin Pavilion are the Emperor's most elite imperial troops. Her amateurish attempts at stealth were like child's play to them. No sooner had she approached, she was apprehended on the spot. When the interrogation report from the commander of the Imperial Guard and my own daily observation logs were both placed before the Emperor, the outcome was set in stone. Inside the Imperial study, the Emperor's voice betrayed no emotion. He asked me, "Lu Qingqing has attempted to touch the Phoenix Seal and eye the divine artifact. What should be her punishment?" I knelt on the ground and said steadily, "According to palace law, she should be executed." When I spoke the final word, I did not show a hint of hesitation. Sympathy and pity are the cheapest and most lethal emotions in this palace. If I am to survive, I must be more cold-blooded than anyone else. The Emperor stared at me for a long time, then suddenly laughed. He waved his hand, assigning the task to me. He said I had done well. He needed someone as decisive as me by his side. I bowed deeply, burying my face into the cold gold tiles. That night, I watched with my own eyes as Lu Qingqing was dragged to the courtyard of the Shengxing Temple, and I turned to leave before the execution. Back at the Office of Unusual Affairs, I filed away Lu Qingqing's case records. In the column for cause of death, I wrote 2 words, "foolish." Then I took out that map of the palace's feng shui array array I had already drawn, and at the location representing the Qilin Pavilion, I gently marked a red dot. The timing is almost ripe. What I have always wanted is not to survive at the whim of a monarch. I want to completely turn this passive situation around and seize my destiny back into my own hands. And that phoenix seal will be the most crucial link in my entire plan. On the other side, Consort Zhao, having been quiet for a long time, recovered from her pregnancy, and upon hearing that I was also a transmigrator, she came to cause trouble for me while heavily pregnant. She cursed me for being a vixen, daring to try and bed the emperor while she was pregnant. The more she glared with fury, the more I could only sigh helplessly. The emperor wants to kill her, and I want to save her. After the state preceptor had been trapped in my array for 10 days, he finally passed away, but I still haven't found the method for his transmigration. The only thing I found on him was a copper bagua mirror. When the sunlight hit it, I held the glowing bagua chart, but I still couldn't figure out the secret to it. Because of my current unique status, the people around me are very respectful. The emperor wanted to give me a title, but I intentionally refused. Consort Zhao seemed to find some sense of superiority, mocking and sneering at me. Siqin, you're nothing more than a head maid at the Ministry of Strange Affairs. No matter how important you think you are, you're still below the Grand Eunuch. What do you think you are? Facing her provocation, I remained silent. I only saw the sun in the sky, bright and scorching, dazzling enough to make one unable to open their eyes. The emperor stood in the sunlight, his shadow cast short behind him. I suddenly recalled a detail about the bagua mirror, and hurried away. The last time I was scouting the area, I discovered that the palace's feng shui had changed. Now, following the trajectory of the sun, I found the spot where the imperial astrologer traveled through. It was an old dry well. When the midday sun shone directly into it at its brightest, the bagua mirror would take effect. At the bottom of the well, there were the astrologer's ID and a laptop. I looked at the laptop screen, and it was precisely the countdown program I had set. It turns out the imperial astrologer was a programmer. He had found a loophole in the space-time tunnel, but due to the surveillance of the heavenly Tao, he could not stay too long. If he exceeded the time limit, he would be erased. All the time-traveling women who came one after another were meant to fill in the roles of heroines for the world story arc, and because the astrologer modified the program, the story consistently resisted whenever it was about to collapse. The current emperor is the younger brother of the true male lead, while the real male lead was trapped in exile by the astrologer. After I carefully checked the contents, I found answers to many things I couldn't figure out. After climbing out of the dry well, I did not hand the laptop over to the emperor. Instead, I told the emperor that I had found the path the astrologer used to travel to and from this world. With just 1% more, I'll get my wish reward. The emperor wanted to fill in the dry well, but I wanted him to travel through it himself. Your Majesty, if you take enough wealth with you, you could buy even more formidable weapons over there. Then you could unite the realm and achieve a grand legacy. Wouldn't that be better? According to my research, the bagua mirror has been tampered with. It can only allow men to pass through. If the other princes find out about this, the emperor raised his hand. I knelt down in a hurry, a physical reflex that brands me a servant in this feudal society. My body knelt, but my heart never submitted. Emperor, are you tempted by the powerful weapons of modern technology? 3 days flew by for me, but they felt like an eternity to the emperor. In the end, the emperor couldn't resist the temptation. He chose to stand by the dry well, carrying gold and jade and various other treasures. I watched as he shone the bagua mirror into the well, opening the portal through time and space, and then he jumped in. The portal vanished the moment the emperor left. By the time Consort Zhao rushed over, it was already too late. She demanded to know if I had gone mad. After sending the emperor to the modern world, what was she supposed to do? At the same time, the real hero had just returned to the palace. It was my first time meeting him, yet it felt as if we had known each other forever. The status screen updated. The monarch's heartthrob level remained at 99%, but the name had changed to the current hero Wang Yu, Yuqing Palace and King Yu. Everything in this world follows a predictable path. The emperor ordered for Consort Zhao to be taken away, and declared on the spot that he would make me empress. I smiled and accepted, then asked the new emperor to entrust me with the empress's seal. The moment I touched the seal, I felt the force within its magnetic field, and the overwhelming pressure that comes with power. I haven't walked the path to the cold palace in months. Consort Zhao is being kept here while pregnant. Have you come to flaunt your triumph? She has been well cared for by Xiao Luzi. She is due to give birth any day this month, yet my empress robes already sting her eyes. Watching her her red-rimmed eyes and tear-streaked face. I say with a tone of pity, do you know why I have you kneel beside the Empress seal every so often? I want you to cry more, so you can cry out all the water in your brain. I tell her that the former emperor is never coming back. He doesn't know geomancy or directions, can't find the correct trajectory of the sun, so he will be trapped forever in the modern era where everyone is equal. A man as self-righteous as him, without an ID card in the modern world, and carrying all that gold and jewelry. Just thinking about it, it must be quite a spectacle. I say that the previous emperor was a coward, hardly worth her crying like this. She was captivated by his appearance and status, seemingly forgetting her own worth. You are about to give birth. This is the late emperor's child. I think you know what to do, without me having to teach you, right? The emperor went missing, and for the new emperor to be legitimate, it couldn't be framed as an act of treason. Therefore, it was I who kept her alive. She stares at me in a daze, seemingly coming to a realization. Have you forgotten our era, where men and women are equal, and society is progressive? This era of male dominance is exactly what we should change. That is what we were meant to do after crossing over. Less than 20% of the maids in this palace can read. This is to keep them obedient, keeping women trained to be ignorant. You clearly have the ability, so why grieve for a man who killed 99 women like us? I sit on the main throne. Have Xiao Lu help her sit up straight. I recounted the deaths of every transmigrator from the 1st to the 100th, especially when I mentioned Lu Qingqing, who was beaten to death by a staff. My hands clenched involuntarily. Rest assured, Your Highness, everything has been arranged. Xiao Liu is my head eunuch now. His conduct has grown increasingly steady. I patted his shoulder lightly. I told him I was still grateful for him delivering that letter to the emperor back then, which brought the emperor back from his place of exile. Watching him bow and scrape, I thought, this era is simply too different from the world I came from. I must stand higher. Only then can I protect myself. On the day of the royal wedding, the emperor lifted my veil. The monitor showed the monarch's affection level at 100%. I could redeem a wish. The emperor pulled me into his arms, his eyes filled with tenderness, asking me what wish I wanted to be granted. I smiled, stroking the emperor's face, silently praying for immortality. The emperor's formerly tender expression froze, seemingly surprised by my answer. Your Majesty, you can see the light screen before my eyes, can't you? The emperor furrowed his brows, pointing at my nose, and angrily asked why I didn't wish to spend our lives as the only two people in each other's worlds. I burst out laughing, unabashed and unbridled. Emperor, did you really think that I traveled thousands of miles to that place of exile just to deliver a letter to you, or that there was any other reason I helped you? You are nothing more than a transition for my shift in power. As for that ethereal fleeting love, I hadn't even met him properly, so where would love come from? The emperor flew into a rage, drawing his sword to strike me. I sidestepped his blow, and he found himself trapped in a loop of confusion. The emperor raged in his impotence, while I forced him to write the abdication decree. Just then Xiao Lu rushed in with hurried footsteps, reporting that Consort Zhao was having a difficult labor. I hurried to Consort Zhao's bedchamber. How could this happen? Weren't all the previous examinations fine? My pelvis is too small. The baby's head is too large, coupled with a breech position. It has caused a difficult labor. Consort Zhao struggled to suppress her cries of pain during contractions, gritting her teeth as she gripped my hand tightly. The midwife's voice grew increasingly urgent. She told me to quickly decide, mother or child. I said save the mother, yet Consort Zhao insisted on saving the child. I was shocked by her decision to protect the baby. Have you lost your mind? For the sake of a man's child, you're willing to throw your life away? She suddenly released my hand, her complexion noticeably paler, tears filling her eyes, gritting her teeth to endure the next wave of pain. She made me promise to raise the child well. One day, her family would be my support as well. Finally, she used all her strength to birth a girl. She personally named her Jingruo, and for the first time I learned that her name in the modern world was Wen Shujing. I watched her quietly, her body turning cold, the floor covered in blood. But this time it would not be a silent burial in a neglected concubine's tomb. I made her the only empress of the late emperor. Her massive coffin was carried through the main ceremonial gate, with all officials mourning her. The entire country observed 3 months of mourning, clutching the sleeping child in my arms. I chose the most powerful dragon vein in the world for Wen Shujing. Who says a woman cannot be buried upon a dragon vein? I am determined to let a woman be the master of this realm. Once I had finished handling the funeral arrangements, I opened the laptop left behind by the imperial preceptor, only to find the battery was running low. This meant my ability to use it was limited. I changed the rules, making the current monarch a task-driven player, starved to the point of near death. He looked at the panel before him. His eyes were filled with despair. Are you satisfied with the conquest plan I designed for your imperial family. I didn't spend my time at the Department of Anomalies in vain. After poring over countless ancient texts, I finally realized that the emperors of the past all used the system to exploit the knowledge and skills of transmigrated women. It was only by chance they encountered a genius like the state preceptor that the dynasty's secrets were laid bare. The emperor before me is not innocent either. Did you really think that by naming me empress, I would be yours heart and soul? I sneered, mocking him. He knew nothing of the agony I endured living in the palace for 3 years. I suffered through 1,543 days and nights, and my heart had long since turned to ice. Then I told the emperor he could leave, but if he refuses to obey, he will be punished by the system. The laptop will lose power forever, becoming nothing more than scrap metal. The system has been permanently configured, unless another person like the state preceptor appears. To find the loophole, the feng shui formation I have set up across the nation is enough to keep this world running exactly as I choose. Before I became emperor, I was Prince Heng. My eldest brother was the undisputed future heir. When I was 20, I fell in love with a woman in strange clothes who seemed to fall from the sky. She stumbled into my arms, bearing a playful smile, and called me little brother the moment she spoke. I learned later that she was a divine maiden sent by the heavens, the future empress, and because I had no claim to the throne, I could not have her. My brother didn't love her as much as I did. He would let misunderstandings and another noble woman's cruelty torment her. When I approached her, clutching a bouquet of gardenias with trepidation, I saw clearly the way she knit her brows. She told me she was sorry. She only ever saw me as a brother. Just as she turned to leave with finality, another man in strange clothing stepped out from behind me. Because he was wearing sunglasses, I couldn't see the look in his eyes, but judging by his expression as he stepped out from behind the rockery, as he emerged, I knew he had witnessed the entire scene. Where we come from, you'd be called a simp. Keep simping and you'll end up with nothing. I had my men seize him, yet he claimed he could help me. He said he came from the same place as the goddess, that this place is just a mini-world created by some system. He is a senior programmer who can bypass the system to hijack it and make it do my bidding. I once questioned his motives for helping me. He simply replied that this was just a way to pass the time. To his eyes, these ancient people are just characters in a game. I didn't understand what he was talking about, but my ambition to have the goddess left me no choice but to trust him. With his disappearance, a crisis emerged between the goddess and my brother. The goddess threw herself into my arms. She begged me to take her away. Yet, at the final moment, she turned back into his arms, while telling me I'm a good man. She couldn't bear to let me down, all the while hesitating between him and me. Does she think I'm not powerful enough? That man has returned. He said that if I could get my brother exiled, she would be mine. I exploited the conflict between the divine maiden and the noblewoman surrounding my brother to achieve my goal. In the end, my brother was sent into exile. When she learned that I had orchestrated this conspiracy, the divine maiden's eyes were filled with hatred for me. That man said, "Don't be impatient. The divine maiden will soon kneel and beg for my favor." Soon, I ascended the throne as emperor. A transparent panel appeared before my eyes, displaying every transmigrator who approached me. Countdown and affection level. The core program for the affection level cannot be modified at the moment. However, I have modified the conquest rules. If those women do not find a way to please you within 99 days, their blood will coagulate and they will die. Those women he spoke of, he collectively referred to as transmigrators. And just as he said, the goddess I adored began to fawn over me and offer me everything. After the bleakness of spring passed, suddenly I found her dull. It turns out I only enjoyed the thrill of the chase. He demanded I make her my empress. But a woman who had slept with my brother, I had no desire to make my queen. She even tried to provoke me with talk of monogamy, then threw herself into the lake to force my regret. I am a monarch, ruler of all under heaven. After I fished her corpse from the water, another divine maiden appeared by my side. They appeared innocent, yet each coveted the empress's seal. I appointed that man as imperial preceptor, but I underestimated the ambition of a hunting dog. He held the system in his grasp, effectively controlling the rules of this world. The transmigrated women who should have served me became his playthings. My dignity as a man was trampled, so I had to drain the talents of every transmigrator and eliminate them before they could conceive. Because the preceptor could only cross over briefly, we played a game of shadows. I knew he wanted to usurp my throne by getting the transmigrators pregnant with his bloodline. In this way, through the power of that lineage, he could remain in this world permanently. I had to find a way to get rid of him. In my restless state, a hidden transmigrator emerged. Siqin, who had laid low in the cold palace for 3 years, proved to be a useful pawn. She could see the interface, which made things even more interesting. Perhaps that was why, after the system was tampered with, the bugs were multiplying. I wanted to pit two transmigrators against each other for my favor, but the transparent interface face suddenly vanished. The preceptor claimed it was punishment for my disobedience. And it was this very punishment that left me unable to see through Siqin. After she helped me finish off the preceptor, she sent me to what they called their world. The 8 diagrams mirror in my hand was unremarkable, and no matter how I chased the sun, I could not return. Siqin said this passageway had been modified, accessible only to men, designed specifically to prevent transmigrators from fleeing. I carried my golden jewelry, walking aimlessly down the street, thinking only of buying weapons and technology to take back. The people here treated me like a lunatic, letting the ones in blue uniforms lock me up. My possessions were all stolen, and they even called me a grave robber. Damn it. I am an emperor. I will not stand for this insult. I had no identity documents, locked away in a cramped space, year after year. It wasn't until I fell critically ill that I was sent to a hospital for treatment. The person next to me was scrolling through short videos on their phone. I heard a familiar name, Siqin. In this so-called short video, she was making my brother try to win her over. The girl next to me was watching intently. I grabbed her hand in excitement. I need to get in there. I need to get inside that. The girl thought I was crazy and laughed when she heard me call Siqin a bitch. The gist of this video was like chocolate. It is fine for people to eat, but for dogs, she didn't finish. She just turned and quickened her pace. I found out later that chocolate is toxic to dogs. Damned men are supposed to be the heavens. Are the women of this era trying to turn the world upside down? The doctor in this world spoke to me with a heavy expression. You have lymphoma. The cancer cells have already spread to all your internal organs. There is no cure despite all medical efforts. You can only watch your life slip away, inch by inch. Before I died, a volunteer asked me softly, "If you have any last wishes, please tell us. We will do our best to fulfill them." I looked out the window at the strange sky and said I wanted to watch that short video. It showed my homeland. The home I could never return to. The volunteer, perhaps pitying me, would often sit by my bedside and chat with me, babbling on about the rapid changes in this world, speaking of new developments I had never heard of. I listened to these irrelevant words, my heart filled with deep burning resentment, my eyes fixed dead on the short video on the phone screen, watching Siqin slowly wear my brother down until his death, watching her take the daughter of that vile grand preceptor and ascend to the throne that rightfully belonged to me. Yet she refused to take the throne herself, choosing instead to remain in the shadows, planning every step, manipulating everything. She personally groomed the child to become a worthy empress, until, at the age of 23, Siqin, before all the subjects of the realm, performed an ascension into the heavens. From that day on, she became the supreme deity of the entire nation. I am filled with such hatred. I truly long to go home, to return to the dynasty that was rightfully mine. I was named crown princess when I was a child. As I grew older, I realized my grandmother never seemed to age, while my grandfather grew increasingly hunched, like decaying wood weathered by the elements, fragile and trembling. I followed by my grandmother's side, learning to review state memorials. Her eyes were always so fierce, and she was exceptionally strict with me, especially when I grew fond of the handsome lad from the general's family. There was a chill in grandmother's eyes. Yet, in the end she knelt down, to warn me not to give my heart away so easily. For if your heart is betrayed, the pain will be unbearable. I did not understand, but I dared not defy her. I thought that once I ascended the throne, the first thing I would do is banish grandmother to a summer palace. But by the time I was 25, after enduring several betrayals, I suddenly realized the one who always stood by my side in the end was grandmother. Grandmother, who was immortal and ageless, had told me of the path that brought her here. But in this world, the belief that men are superior is deeply rooted. It would not be easily undone. All she sought was equality, a fair era, one that requires unity from all to achieve. Because of the limitations of the time, she taught me how to endure, and then I watched her leave the palace, returning only once every few years. I withered with age, yet he remained forever young, and girls can be employed, can go to school, enact new marriage laws, implement monogamy, and require exams for parenthood. Otherwise, no birth permit will be issued. I gradually understood what the blueprint in her heart looked like.